Steam Machine is a bit too expensive. 1,500 Canadian dollars is insane. The Steam Machine with a controller is $528 more expensive than the PS5 Digital. That is truly disappointing. Complaints like these quickly spread across gaming media, where Valve's machine was measured against Sony's console in many of the places it appeared. Yet, what made the backlash unusual was that buyers already knew what had driven the price higher. AI had squeezed hardware costs, and the Steam Machine still sold for only slightly more than building a comparable PC. So the discontent never centered on whether $1,049 was a fair hardware price. It centered on something else entirely. Why wasn't the Steam Machine being sold like a PlayStation? Notably, even an industry heavyweight behind Baldur's Gate 3 argued that Valve should simply knock another $200 off the price. Steam was already a money printer, so refusing to buy users with a subsidy could ultimately cost the company far more than the $200 it refused to spend. Valve never embraced that logic. To the company, subsidizing the hardware was the first step toward building a more closed ecosystem, while keeping the platform open created greater value over time. That explains why Valve refused to follow Sony's model. It does not explain what following it would have cost. That is the story. The Steam Machine is not really a console in the traditional sense. It is a standard x86 personal computer rebuilt into a living room gaming box. It can even install Windows, which makes it far more open than a PlayStation or an Xbox. And yet that openness points to something unusual about the product itself. Valve does not appear to be trying to maximize how many units it sells. Instead, it is trying to push the market open. This is not the first time an open system has been used to challenge a dominant platform. In 2012, Valve founder Gabe Newell spoke at Casual Connect in Seattle and warned that Windows 8 was a catastrophe for the PC industry. His deeper fear was that Microsoft might eventually follow Apple's iOS model and turn Windows into a closed platform. For any third-party software distributor, especially Steam, that would be an existential problem. Imagine trying to build a Steam-like store inside the iPhone App Store. It does not really work because iOS itself is already the game distribution platform. Valve's dream is a world where many gaming boxes can run Steam without depending entirely on Microsoft. Even better for Valve, those boxes would run SteamOS. But the moment Valve tries to build a new platform to challenge Microsoft, it immediately runs into the same hurdles that once doomed Windows Phone in its battle against Android. Years earlier, when Android rose, it took the mobile operating system position Microsoft had expected Windows to occupy. Microsoft wanted Windows Phone to claw that position back, or at least split the mobile world into two serious camps. But that required HTC, Sony Ericsson, and Nokia to charge ahead, prematurely betting on an unproven market. To those hardware companies, the invitation felt less like a partnership than a blood oath. If Microsoft controlled the app distribution layer, Microsoft captured the most valuable part of the ecosystem. The phone makers were left with thinner hardware margins, larger research costs, and the inventory risk of a market that might never arrive. Without phone sales, developers had no reason to build apps. Without apps, consumers had no reason to buy the phones. Without sufficient subsidies or a truly stunning experience, the ecosystem was destined to die in an application desert. As the ecosystem withered, more and more phone brands aligned themselves with Android. Microsoft was eventually forced to acquire Nokia's mobile business, betting on an iPhone-style vertical integration model to accelerate R&D and using the Lumia brand as a flagship proof of concept to break the cycle. But it was simply a case of too little, too late. That history matters because Steam Deck proved Valve could build good hardware. But it did not prove PC makers would follow Valve into SteamOS. As a handheld, Steam Deck was a success. As a reference design meant to pull PC brands into SteamOS, it was much less convincing. The PC makers voted with their feet. That makes Steam Machine 2.0 a second attempt, and this time it has to offer PC brands something more persuasive than proof that Valve can build a nice device. This strategy of using a showcase device actually has a success story, and it comes from the system that replaced Microsoft, Google. Google used Nexus to push Android forward before Android became secure enough to stand without it. Once Android was secure, Nexus could slowly fade into the background. Valve's play mirrored Google's. They were the Android of the PC world, with SteamOS as their platform and the Steam Machine acting as their Nexus, the original showcase device. But here's the reality most people miss. If Valve had poured massive subsidies into these machines and won, it wouldn't have proved the product was a hit. It only would have proved that they had a bottomless budget. In fact, it would have backfired, driving away the very PC brands they needed to build the ecosystem. The deeper danger is that if this subsidy strategy fails, Valve will lose its leverage against Microsoft, eventually allowing Microsoft to slowly make Steam less necessary. This is the first cost of subsidy. But why does that happen? Why would winning customers through subsidies push away the very partners you're trying to attract? If Valve sells the official Steam machine too cheaply, even taking a $200 loss on every unit, imagine being Dell, ASUS, Lenovo, or Alienware in that situation. That is not an ecosystem invitation. It is a warning label. It tells every PC hardware company that Valve is willing to use the 30% cut it earns from game sales to subsidize hardware. If you don't have a business like Steam, don't bother entering this market. A high official price creates a pricing umbrella for the entire PC gaming hardware ecosystem. It allows Valve's own machine to set a standard without becoming the price floor every other manufacturer has to bleed under. Under that umbrella, Alienware can build a premium gaming box. ASUS can experiment with cooling and controller layouts, Dell can test larger form factors, and Lenovo can see whether one PC can seamlessly power both the study and the living room with a long HDMI cable and a wireless controller. That is not a small detail. It is the difference between Valve selling a box and Valve recruiting an industry. The first generation of Steam machines showed what happens when that recruitment fails. In 2015, Valve wanted third-party companies like Alienware and ROG to build hardware, but the market never got a clear enough official price anchor or system standard. Consumers saw fragmented boxes, unclear value, and weak reasons to choose SteamOS over the Windows PCs they already understood. The Steam Deck later solved a different problem with a very aggressive $399 starting price. That was great for Valve and great for buyers, but it also made life harder for devices like the ASUS ROG and Lenovo Legion Go. Now suppose Microsoft disappeared tomorrow. Would hardware subsidies suddenly make sense? Maybe, but Valve still probably would not do it. Sony and Microsoft can subsidize consoles because the console is the beginning of the user acquisition funnel. According to industry estimates, a new PlayStation 5 buyer can generate about $350 in net software cash flow for Sony during the first 2 years. If the subsidy brings in enough new users, the math can work. But that logic depends on the word new. At some point, the share of truly new customers starts to decline. After that, subsidies stop being a customer acquisition tool and start becoming a market share weapon. So who is actually buying a $1,049 Steam machine? Most early buyers are likely Steam loyalists who already own hundreds of games and already spend hundreds of dollars a year on Steam. If those users move from a Windows gaming PC to a Steam machine, Valve has not gained a new customer. It has moved the same customer from one device to another. The Steam machine might attract some Epic users or some PlayStation users, but that group has to be large enough to justify the subsidy. Valve already controls roughly 70% of the PC game distribution market. Epic is the challenger, which gives it more motive to buy its way into the living room. But motivation is not the same as ability. Epic Games Store takes a 12% cut from game sales, while Valve can take up to 30%. That difference matters enormously when hardware subsidies have to be recovered through software profits. If Epic cannot beat Steam on the software layer, it is even harder to beat Steam by adding subsidized hardware on top. The capital problem is brutal because the pioneer buys the market at cost, while the follower must buy it at a premium it cannot afford. For Epic, the barriers are not only financial. Steam has a mode of inertia built from thousands of backlogged games that users already own. It also has two-sided network effects from workshop mods, marketplace items, friends lists, reviews, and years of social history. Over the past few years, Epic spent hundreds of millions of dollars giving away free PC games. Many players claimed the free games and left, treating Epic like a clearance aisle while Steam remained the digital mausoleum where their unplayed libraries already lived. This is where comparing Valve with its biggest rival, Epic, makes the picture much clearer. It shows how a hardware subsidy can turn from a customer acquisition strategy into a financial drain. Let's go one step further. In consumer hardware, the life or death numbers are roughly 1 million units per year and 10 million units across the full product cycle. If a product cannot reach those numbers, it is hard to believe research and development costs will ever be fully absorbed across volume. Sony learned this lesson with the PlayStation 3. In 2006, the PlayStation 3 was expensive to build because it included advanced hardware such as a Blu-ray drive. Its cost was roughly $800 per unit, but Sony priced it at $599 to compete with Microsoft's Xbox 360. That meant Sony lost more than $200 on each unit, while consumers still thought the console was shockingly expensive. Sony expected to sell 6 million units in 6 months, but actual sales were only a little more than half of that target. The result was years of multi-billion-dollar losses that nearly dragged the broader Sony group into crisis. Then Nintendo attacked from below with the $249 Wii. Sony eventually built enough scale to survive that valley. The PlayStation 4 sold more than 100 million units, and the PlayStation 5 has also sold very well. Apple showed the opposite version of the hardware dream. The first iPhone launched as a luxury product with very high positive gross margin. Analysts estimated that its bill of materials was under $250, while Apple could make roughly $300 of profit per unit. In less than 2 months, early buyers helped Apple absorb the first wave of development costs. Then, only 45 days after launch, Steve Jobs cut the iPhone price by $200. The move shocked the industry and angered early buyers, but it revealed the rhythm every hardware company wants. Sell first to the people who will pay almost anything, then lower the price when scale begins to do the work. Very few companies can actually do it. Valve knows the Steam machine is unlikely to sell like a PlayStation. Heavy PC gamers buying an x86 gaming box are not the same market as console buyers purchasing a closed entertainment appliance. That creates another problem. For Valve, letting high-end buyers absorb the development costs is not greed. By contrast, subsidizing the hardware would have meant burning that safety net, forcing them into an all-or-nothing gamble where they had to scale to 10 million units just to survive. Even that still isn't the biggest risk. Beyond the surface, cheap hardware creates a more mundane but very real hidden cost. The first production run of the Steam machine is almost certainly not going to be huge. That could be because of demand testing, manufacturing limits, or simple launch caution. They might not even bother selling it as a Steam machine. To them, it's just another discounted PC to flip. Sony experienced a version of this with the PlayStation 3. Early PS3 models supported Linux installation. Because Sony was losing roughly $200 to $300 per console, universities and research labs realized that PS3 units were unusually cheap computing nodes. The US Air Force famously bought about 1,700 PS3 units to build the Condor cluster. Those machines did not buy games or generate software revenue. For Sony, that subsidy became a dead account. If the same happens to Valve, the damage goes far beyond financial loss. When scalpers hijack the supply, customers either fail to acquire the hardware or are forced to pay inflated prices. Consequently, Valve loses its core audience and suffers from brand dilution, while the scalpers' buying spree creates a false prosperity that misleads the company about its open system strategy. The open system strategy remains incomplete, with one final link left untested. Should Valve simply embrace the Microsoft fold? Steam can already be downloaded from the Microsoft Store, but it is not deeply integrated into Microsoft's gaming experience. Epic is in a different position because games tied to Epic, including Fortnite, can already appear in Microsoft Store search results. The distance between indexing a game and distributing a game is only a wall. When the platform owner believes the conditions are right, that wall can be pushed down. EA Play gained access to PlayStation customers through Sony's platform, but that access also gave Sony leverage over catalog placement, promotion, and bundling. Yelp and RealPlayer faced their own versions of the same problem, where a vertical service looked powerful until the platform beneath it absorbed the function. Epic almost certainly understands this risk, and is highly likely gambling on the premise that as long as Steam remains entrenched, the Microsoft Store will find it near impossible to breach the wall and monopolize PC game distribution. That leaves Epic room to pick up customers through the gaps. So Valve is boxed in from both sides. Sony used subsidies to turn itself into a platform, but Valve has too many reasons not to take that road. Microsoft can offer distribution, but deep dependence on Microsoft points toward a different version of the same platform risk. That leaves the open ecosystem route, completely unsubsidized. This is the definitive account of how Valve's open ecosystem ambitions culminated in a $1,049 hardware paradox. The ruinous cost of hardware subsidies was a persistent bleeding that Valve simply could not afford to absorb. Consequently, this four-figure price tag was the inevitable equilibrium forced by multi-layered strategic friction between the platform and external manufacturers.